So I just recently finished Yakuza Kiwami, and I decided to give the Amazon Prime Video series a watch, and I have many mixed feelings about it. If you want a quick answer, I give it a 7 out of 10 and recommend you play the game first before watching the show. But if you do want to hear my in-depth review, then go ahead and keep watching. So the way this video is going to work is that I will give my review and analysis on 3 different topics, through a filmmaker's eye, characters, acting and casting, and the story. And then I will let you decide on whether you'd want to watch the show or not based on my reviews and analyses. And also, I need to get this out of the way before I say anything. This is not in the show whatsoever. It was solely used as a promo for the show, and it never happens in any post-credits scene or any episodes or anything. So if you haven't watched the show yet, I saved you at least that disappointment. Now, before the show was released, there were a lot of articles posted online as to what they were and weren't including, and there were a lot of mixed reactions on the decisions that they made. One of the biggest topics discussed was the fact that the show is going to completely avoid all of the silliness that Yakuza is known for and focus on the more serious tones of the franchise. And I'll talk about this more later on, but for the most part, that is true. Another bit of news that came out is that the cast and crew made the decision to completely avoid playing any of the games before making the show, as they wanted to do their own version. Despite this, they claimed it would be loosely based on Yakuza Kiwami, which is the PS3/4 remake of Yakuza 1, which was originally on the PS2. It was said and revealed that the major plot points from the games were kept in, but everything else is majority screenplay original. That I can confirm is true, and I will also go further in depth about later on. This was received the most harshly by all fans, including myself, because how can a crew make an adaptation TV series without taking in any of the media that they're adapting it from? Well, the way they decided to go about it was very interesting, and I'm here to talk about that more. So now, with the little intro out of the way, let's begin. Okay, so I am currently in film school, and throughout my years I've been learning all different kinds of techniques in film, and I've learned to appreciate films a lot more. I've picked up habits of paying attention to the writing, the cinematography, the choreography, the editing, etc. And in my opinion, this show's filmmaking is actually pretty amazing. I'm having a hard time finding out who the crew of this show is, and some of the only credits I've been seeing on IMDb and Wikipedia are 2 directors, Masaharu Take and Kengo Takimoto. So I'm sorry in advance to the DP that I could not find your credit, but your work is amazing. So many shots look incredible with the way the lighting worked around the cast and showing how dramatic one particular shot can be. I would also like to give kudos to the choreographer who did an amazing job creating the action for the actors to perform. Some of the fights really looked like they came straight from the game. Another thing I was blown away by was the set design. It is true to the Yakuza games and is very well made, even if it was majority CGI. The one set design I did not like, however, was the Millennium Tower. This is what it looks like in-game. And this is what it looks like in the show. The reason for the art department to make it look like this is beyond me. And don't worry, this isn't a spoiler. Its design has nothing to do with the story, and the characters treat it like they normally would. It's just something I thought I would point out because it confused me so much as to why it looks like that. They also played Mr. Blue Sky during a sequence, and I guess it fit for what was going on at the time, but it felt so out of place. And, speaking of music, I think the score in this was also great. I personally do like the Yakuza video game score better, but this one is still really good. It has the same intensity as the original Yakuza score does, while also keeping it original to the show and giving it a different feel at times. Now, this is something I feel like I could have talked about in the story section of this video, but I think it fits better here considering how I feel about it. The show takes place mostly between 1995 and 2005, the same year that Yakuza 1/Kiwami takes place in, and the way they show what year it is very odd to me. They have an animated indicator that appears on screen saying what year it is, but it moves super slowly and it threw me off many times. Like, it could be switching from 1995 to 2005, and for a good noticeable second it would say 2996, and I would get super thrown off. Not sure if that's because I was sleep deprived while watching it, but that's just me either way. Alright, that's honestly about all I have to say about the actual production, setting aside casting, acting, story, and more. But with that out of the way, let's talk about casting. So I did not watch this show when it came out, and I've been seeing so many comments on Instagram and other social media talking about the casting, and for the most part, I agree with everything that people have said online. The two most frequent ones I've seen talked about are Kiryu and Nishikiyama, the main characters of the show. People were saying the casting for Nishikiyama was perfect, and people were saying the casting for Kiryu was also really good, however the actor is too slender and doesn't match the body type of Kiryu in the games. I do agree with both. I'd say the casting for almost all the characters is super good. IMDb says the casting director was Ko Iwagami, so kudos to him. Despite that, I do have a few things to say about the casting choices. There's one small reason I don't like the majority of the casting, and it's for the same reason: their age. However, I do understand that sometimes in the Yakuza games, the characters do appear much older than they really are. Like, how is this a 20-year-old man? I'm 20 and I look like this! I don't know if I've just got a baby face or what, but I don't understand how that is the same age as this. But anyway, the characters in the show either appear too old or too young for my taste. There are a couple of characters, however, that I think were perfectly casted. And I did mention this was spoiler free and I'd only be using information visible from the trailer, so I can really only say one name concerning that. I think the actor chosen for Majima was perfect. And might I add, this is just a minor spoiler, but I feel like it needs to be said. To Majima fans, do not expect a whole lot from him. He has a total of maybe 10 to 15 minutes of screen time throughout the entire show. And I'm with y'all on this. He's my favorite character, and it made me so sad that he was rarely shown. But anyway, I think the actor looks very similar to the Majima in-game, and I also think his acting is super in character and it works perfectly. Going off of that, I honestly think all of the cast acting was really good. They were super in character for whomever they were playing, and they portrayed the emotions their character was feeling perfectly through their expressions and body language and the way they were talking, their tone, everything. It was really good. Also going off of that, another thing I noticed was that despite the characters looking the part really well and having amazing acting, there were some that the personalities didn't match at all. Now that is not a jab at the actors. I still think all of the actors did an amazing job no matter who they played. This is on the writers. So, in the games, you know how Kiryu is a very confident and brave guy and will take on anyone in a fight if they just look at him wrong? Well, in this, Kiryu is very timid and naive, and he doesn't really talk a whole lot either. And I understand he's kind of quiet in the games too, but for me, I think this is a bit of a stretch. But at times, it does work for his character, but he feels still too young and too much like a shy kid. Well, I've said what I wanted about the cast, characters, and acting, so now we can move on to the part I'm very excited to talk about: the story. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the cast and crew of this show did not play any of the games and decided to create their own story in the Yakuza universe. That did and didn't work at times. There were a few parallels, but also like I mentioned before, only the major plot points from Yakuza 1 and Kiwami were included. Moving on, let's actually discuss the story in the show. So despite me being super disappointed about the fact that I was just talking about, I was still very impressed with what they managed to fit in 6, 45 to 50 minute episodes. The pacing was a bit slow at times, but then it picked up greatly shortly afterwards. And the story itself was honestly pretty good too. Now I do love the original stories from the game a lot more, but the show really knew how to tug at my heartstrings pretty damn hard, especially towards the end. Oh god. It's not what I expected at all, and I'm honestly very impressed with what they managed to make. But there was one more thing that I've been seeing people say online, and I agree with more than anything I've previously said. This is a really good show, but a horrible adaptation. And like I said, that is true. I completely agree with that. Honestly, if they took out all of the parts that tied it to Yakuza at all, like the characters, locations, major plot points, stuff like that, it would be such an amazing show, but it would be nothing like Yakuza. Anyway, something I want to talk about is that there are characters in the show that also exist in the game universe, but their names have been changed for whatever reason. You couldn't get that answer out of me. It didn't take me long to figure out who is who, and I don't imagine it'd be too hard for other people to figure it out as well. Another thing I noticed that really shocked me as I was watching is that this is a brutal show. This is way more brutal than any Yakuza violence I've experienced or seen at all. And in the games, you have characters stabbing each other or getting shot or sliced by a knife or something, and quite frankly, not as much blood as there should be. But in the show, you see a lot more than you would in any Yakuza game at all. It is super bloody, and there are some really graphic scenes that will definitely make you feel what the character is feeling. Sometimes it's a pretty hard watch, but I personally like the more realistic turn. And I know I mentioned this earlier, that it was stated that none of the silliness from the games would be included in the show at all, but I don't think they made themselves clear enough. Silliness is a part of the Yakuza games by nature. It's unavoidable. There's no way they could take it all out, right? Well, they didn't. The way I describe it is that the silliness isn't quote-unquote Yakuza sub-story level silliness, but just more quote-unquote generic Yakuza silliness. It's got its funny moments, but yeah, either way, it is absolutely a more mature and serious show compared to the games. Another thing I noticed while watching is the show isn't only based on Yakuza 1 and Kiwami. I saw some bits of Yakuza 0 in there, a small amount of Yakuza Kiwami 2, or just Yakuza 2, and even a character from Yakuza 4. It is certainly mostly Kiwami/1 based, but there are some characters and plot points that are seen in other games that you'll see throughout the show. Alright, we've made it. So what are my final thoughts on the Like a Dragon Yakuza TV show? I'd honestly say it's pretty decent. I will stand by the fact that it is a much better standalone TV show than an adaptation, but, I mean, for what it is, it's still really good. Like I said earlier, I give it a 7 out of 10, now justified by all the reasons I have listed in this video. I still do absolutely recommend that if you have any interest at all, definitely play at least 0 and Kiwami 1 before watching the show. I think it was personally better to experience the original games first and then compare how the show did them justice. Now before I go, I do have something I want to say. I have an entire recorded segment where I go over all the parallels that I noticed within the show, so if you would want me to go over that, then let me know in the comments and I will consider making a video going just over the parallels that I noticed compared to Kiwami or other games alongside the show. So yeah, that's about all I got. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts were of this video and if you're gonna give the show a watch.
Or don't. I don't give a shit.